Greetings, everyone. Happy Monday night, December 18th, here on the Wolverine.com YouTube channel, live here for the first time in a few weeks on a Monday. Getting back on schedule, push back an hour tonight for some media availability as Rose Bowl prep is fully underway for Michigan football as they prepare for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Two-man booth tonight. Anthony Broome here with our Chris Balas. And Chris, it feels like forever since you and I were on a show together.
I know it, especially without Anthony or without Clay or without me, whatever. Man, I've been sick for a month. I'm just happy to be back here and been on up and down. And so ready to talk Rose Bowl, man, ready to get back into football. It's amazing. The season ended, just 2 or 3, like 3 weeks ago, or something like that. And it feels like months. So as long as that season seemed to take. So, and it's not over yet, man. We are one of the fortunate few that get to cover a playoff game.
That's right. All the travel accommodations are made. The credentials are in. The three of us will be there. So excited for that. We will talk about Rose Bowl prep. Was able to get into Schembechler Hall today and talk to Michigan players. We'll talk to coordinators on Tuesday, some more players later on this week. So we will hit on that. Michigan held its awards banquet last night. So Chris and I are going to take the opportunity to hand out our own Michigan football awards. So we'll do that as well. Talk a little bit of hoops and then take some questions at the end and get out of here in a jiff. But before we do that, I want to shout out, as you can see me wearing the crew neck sweatshirt here. Shout out our friends over at homefieldapparel.com. You guys have heard us talk about them all football season long. They've been amazing, incredible partners for us throughout. Homefield is a premium collegiate apparel brand based in Indianapolis, a place that we are very familiar with being now at this point in the game. They have a commitment to creating incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs, over 150 colleges to choose from, including your favorite teams. Of course, you're here for Michigan. They have a Michigan collection with some incredible stuff, including this crew neck that I'm wearing here tonight. So shout out to the guys over there. They're dedicated to delving into the archives and history of each school. Michigan's going to the Rose Bowl it's actually 14 days from today. They've got a couple Rose Bowl shirts over there that are pretty awesome. They find those unique logos, mascots, moments that are thoughtfully designed and really incredible stuff. And as the most comfortable stuff that I have in my collection as well. So head on over to homefieldapparel.com today. Maybe get some of that last minute holiday shopping done. Use that promo code Wolverine23. The code is good for 15% off any customer's first order over at Homefield. So head on over to homefieldapparel.com. That is promo code Wolverine23. And shout out to our friends in the heart of Big Ten country at Homefield Apparel. All right, Chris, back in the building this week. Michigan was back practicing last week, but they let us, the unclean, back into the building this week to pick the brains of some of the guys there. And the tone, the storyline coming into this, right, has been 2 trips to the college football playoff the last 2 years and haven't been able to get the job done for varying reasons. Some people will say they practiced too much. Some people will say they overlooked TCU last year. Some people will say they didn't practice enough. But this year, it seems like the approach is a little bit different. We're hearing that they're doing a little more mental work this time around. They want to get some of these guys fresh. We know this team was so banged up at the end of the year. Not necessarily you lose Zach Zinter, but you had a lot of guys that just had the bumps and bruises, and they're trying to keep a veteran team fairly healthy right now. So heading into what is now week 2 officially of bowl prep, what are you hearing about how this team is approaching it?
Yeah, as long as they stay, in good shape. And I think that's something that Ben Herbert's been responsible for and does a great job with these guys, right? He's one of the best in the business, strength coaches. We've had teams in the past that have gone into bowl games that were fat and happy. And my podcast partner, Doug Skeen, talks about that all the time. They went into the 1992 Rose Bowl and got absolutely hammered. They were all 10 pounds heavier after eating for a month and, tried to get back in shape a month before the game. Didn't quite work out. So that will not be an issue. To me, this is more about it's wonderful, the mental prep and stuff like that. But it's all about matchups in these games. And Alabama's a good football team. I understand that people are going to say, well, they barely beat Auburn and they barely did this and they barely did that. But when they play, Anthony, they can play with anybody, right? So these guys on the edges are going to have to be mentally prepared to see the best edges that they've probably seen all year, with the exception maybe of Penn State, right? Chop Robinson was a nightmare for those guys, and they had to change their game plan because of it. So you're hoping that they are preparing for that. And hey, if they have to leave somebody in to chip somebody, or if they have to give these guys some help, that's what they're working on. And that's what we're hearing, is that they are really studying the film and doing a really good job of that. So To me, that's the biggest part of this is how the coaches are getting these guys prepared to deal with the matchups that might not be in their favor.
Yeah, it's good on good this time of year. All four of these teams in the playoff have their strengths. They all have their weaknesses too. But I think there's this perception among, I mean, not I won't say Michigan fans in general, but a lot of people are under the assumption that if something doesn't look easy, that it means doom and gloom for Michigan. But that just means you have to work. What does Jim Harbaugh always say? If you want to get better at something, you work a little harder at it. I like, the mental reps is a big part of it right now. We talked to Junior Colson earlier today, and he said even in his downtime, he does not go anywhere without his iPad right now. They have access to practice film and Alabama film and all the things they need to prepare for this game. Guys are taking it seriously. Just because you're not being as physical, they're picking and choosing their spots. I think the overarching takeaway is that yes, they're staying in shape, they're taking care of their bodies, they're going through treatment, but they're going to be kind of targeted in the areas where they look to crank things up over the next few weeks. Of course, they'll have a full week of practice this week. You'll have the holidays on Monday and Tuesday, the Christmas holiday, and then I think from there they leave the 26th, the 27th. So it's here. It's here before you know it. It's been a long 2 weeks. At the same time, it feels like it's flying by. We talked to JJ McCarthy earlier today, and he said, and I'll just read his quote here. He says, "I think the last couple of years, I felt like we fell victim to paralysis by overanalysis and just getting over detailed with too many things and overthinking things. These first couple of weeks really just took things kind of light, easing into things, and it's kind of been helping keep things fresh every single day. I think that's going to be the biggest difference in keeping a balance." Chris, so often when you have a team, there's a process for a lot of teams, a lot of programs in learning what it takes to get through that glass ceiling in the postseason. We see it. Think of local examples. The Red Wings in the '90s had to fail a couple of years in a row, and then they reap the rewards of that. That's one that pops in my head. But I think for this team, the biggest key is, like JJ McCarthy says, finding that balance between what worked about last year's approach or the year before's approach and what they can do to tailor it to what their needs are right now.
Yeah, and it's so different, right? Because one year you were a pretty substantial underdog and probably should have been bigger than they were in hindsight against Georgia. That was a loaded team with NFL talent all over the place. And then last year, I think there might have been some overconfidence. And speaking to some of the coaches after that game, they said, "This is what you get, man." They were all assuming that they were going to be playing Georgia again and that it was just a foregone conclusion. They forgot to come out and bring it against TCU. They got behind and couldn't come all the way back. So, and of course, there were some game plan issues as well in that game. Clearly, when you give up that many points, and JJ McCarthy didn't play well. If any one of those things goes differently, they still win that football game, but they didn't. So now you've got a completely different challenge. I think you're right in the middle, right, where some people are expecting you to win, some people aren't, and this is what a lot of people think is a 50-50 game, including the people betting in Vegas. So to me, it comes down to, yeah, it's about preparation. There's no question about it, but they aren't going to be overlooking Alabama, number one, and they understand what the SEC is all about, having played the SEC's best a couple of years ago and understanding that Alabama is playing good football. At least they did last week to get here. And no, they didn't play their best game against Auburn. They were very, very fortunate to win. But how many teams that have been very, very fortunate to squeak past somebody all of a sudden, take advantage of that and win it all, or play even better the next week, having a new lease on life. It happens all the time. So this is a very, very good football team. They understand that. They aren't going to be looking past them. They aren't overconfident. So that's an interesting and new dynamic this year.
Well, it kind of goes hand in hand too with we saw the story that came out from Bruce Feldman on Monday, where
Oh,
again, it's the year of the anonymous Big Ten coach, right? And oh well, Michigan didn't look right down the stretch, and oh maybe they've lost steam, lost momentum. I think we talk about this all the time, where in the span of any season, you're going to have at least one or two of those, as I coin them, again, kids earmuffs, the oh shit games, where you
Yeah.
are lucky to get out with a victory, and those last 3 games of the regular season. You could maybe put all of those in that category, considering Jim Harbaugh wasn't there. JJ McCarthy was banged up. You find out the day before you leave on the trip somewhere that either Jim Harbaugh suspended or Chris Partridge is fired. And again, I think there's a lot to be said about surviving all of that and being able to still win, get yourself into this position where, I do think that the taking a step back and making sure you're getting the bodies right and getting the mind right and just go out there and play football. There's no talk to JJ McCarthy today. Remember last year around this time, those guys, and JJ was part of it too, talking about the smash fest against TCU, and we can't wait to run against that weird front. And again, to use your term, or to use Doug Skeen's term, little fat and happy, and you got punched in the mouth. And again, had nothing to do with the signs. They played really it was unfocused, undisciplined football that day, and super uncharacteristic. But I think this has been all about them locking in, because if they do just show up on January 1 and play football and play good football, I think they have a really good chance to win, just like they've had every week this year.
Yeah, and really the only oh shit game where, you know what, everybody thought, boy, this is a lot closer than it's supposed to be, was the Maryland game. And part of that was because JJ McCarthy was playing on one leg. We had gotten, as I wrote today, we had gotten word the night before that he might not even go. We figured that he would, because that's how tough he is. But the kid, after the game, you could see could barely walk. Number one, he couldn't move very well. There was a lot of pain there. And now he's going to be 100% going into this game. But you know what? Iowa was ugly, but you know what? There was never any danger. Anthony, when they went up 10-0, we all looked at each other and we said game over, right? Barring some kind of a disaster. Yeah. And we all knew that they were going to win that game. Ohio State was going to be a 50-50 game, and they came out on top of that. And to me, that was the one game was the Maryland game, and they were up big in that game. And I thought they kind of lost their focus a little bit. And really, they played well in early parts of the Iowa game too, and kind of lost their focus as well. So I don't have any concerns about this team in terms of, okay, when you have these idiot coaches saying, well, there's a reason, that look at McCarthy isn't all that, well, it was backloaded schedule with 3 unbelievable defenses in the last 4 or 5 games there, right? Fantastic. Some of the best defenses in the country. Number 2, he's not playing at 100%. So no, it didn't have anything to do with, knowing the signals and knowing when they're blitzing and when they're not, and so on and so forth. That's idiotic. And really the only ones clinging to that still, like I've said many times, are the rivals and maybe a couple of the Big Ten coaches. The narrative has completely disappeared because they've won those games. Michigan does not have to beat Alabama for that narrative to disappear completely. But I'll tell you what, if they do beat Alabama, then anybody who continues to talk after that is going to look like even more of an idiot.
Yeah, I think we both wrote something about that on Monday. But yeah, why did it look different? Maybe it has to do with the fact that they played the number 1, the number 2, the number 5 ranked defenses in the country. After that, Penn State, Ohio State, Iowa, and mind you, and they don't talk about this when they throw the anonymous quotes out there, Michigan covered the spread in all of those games,
right?
Which again, it's not always an indicator of game performance and things like that, but still handled your business. Still, when the lights were the brightest, made the plays needed to win. And that's, again, I hate to boil it, because we're gonna a lot of analysis, a lot of content over the next few weeks about this game. But I'll give you the long and the short of it right here. If they play well, they'll probably win. If they don't, they'll probably lose. There you go.
If now they could play, they could play well and still lose this game too if Alabama plays really well as well. I see somebody over here saying Alabama's a good team, but the matchups favor Michigan. I don't think the matchups favor Michigan on their offense versus their defense. I look at the secondary for Alabama. I think they're going to do okay covering the Michigan receivers, and I think they're going to be able to bring a safety into the box, which is going to be a struggle for Michigan to run the ball. Michigan, everybody's like, well, Alabama's a little softer on the interior and teams have run on them, but Michigan hasn't run on many teams this year. That's the problem, Anthony. It's like you look at Nebraska, and that's the way they played against Nebraska and ran the ball against Nebraska was the way I expected them to run the ball all year. And it just wasn't that. There were so many inefficient plays. And Jim Harbaugh was saying, well, it wasn't going to always be like the last 2 years. And he's absolutely right about that. But some of the things that those Big Ten coaches said as well did carry some weight. I don't think they're as good at center. The tackles are not pass blocking well enough. And I think that's a strength of Alabama's, is getting to the quarterback on the edge. So we saw how it changed the game plan against Penn State. That's something that Michigan's going to have to improve upon. So that's why I think it'll be a lower scoring game. When you talk about matchups, I don't think Alabama's going to be moving up and down the field on this Michigan defense. But they do provide a different challenge as well, in that they've got a quarterback that is big and strong and can run. And damn well they're going to be running him against Michigan and doing some things to move the ball that way.
Yeah, a lot of people have been wondering what Alex Orji's role on this team is going to be this year. Well, his role is playing Jalen Milroe for 4 weeks. Because that's what they have him doing right now, and it sounds like they're getting a lot of good looks out of it as well. So, we'll see what happens. Again, I think when we look at those 2 semifinal games, I think most of the points scored in the semifinal games are going to come in that second game of the day, with those two explosive offenses. But I can see this one being a little more of a meat grinder. And again, just you have to, at the end of the day, you just have to show up and play well and give yourself a chance from there. So any other thoughts on, we're going to talk to obviously the coordinators on Tuesday. We'll talk to more guys later this week, but is there anything in particular you want to know or you'd like to hear from these guys before getting on a plane next week?
No. It's all a lot of it's coach speak and guys talking, and it's fun to talk to these guys, but what are they going to say that we don't know? Number one, there's not going to be any bulletin board material. It's going to be, a couple years ago it was JJ saying I can't wait to line up and pound these guys and so on and so forth and run the ball at them, and TCU took it personal and they came out and they said, oh, that we use that as bulletin board material, blah 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 blah. And you know what, but there's not really anything that I can point to and say, okay, now if some of these guys, these seniors said, hey, I'm coming back next year or something, that'd be great. That'd be fun. But as it pertains to the game, Anthony, it's really not one of those things where they're going to say anything enlightening. And that's really just kind of the way it is. So there will be a lot of fluff and a lot of respect for the SEC, so on and so forth. And to me, it comes down to, again, how are they going to move the ball? And I think a lot of that's going to come to JJ McCarthy. Somebody over here saying McCarthy is 100% healthy. We knew that. Will JJ scramble more? I think he needs to. I think they need to really employ more with his feet and with his arm. Josh, I don't think there's any question about it. And this is going to be a game in which he has to shine if Michigan is going to win.
Yeah, the other thing I do like about the layoff is that it almost, again, it's different because they had the first week off and they're not doing things quite as physically right now, but it almost serves as a time to reestablish what you're all about. And for me, I think the mental work, I think probably will benefit the offensive line the most because I think what we've seen is that that's a group that's pretty capable, especially the tackles. I think they can play much better than they have, but it's been sloppy stuff. It's been some uncharacteristic kind of lack of attention to detail, like we talked about earlier. So the mental reps, getting them in the lab, getting things right, getting your fundamentals down, because Alabama's a team. I mean, we know Nick Saban, Bill Belichick kind of tied at the hip in terms of their football lives. That's a team. You make any mistake, they will pounce on you and you will pay dearly for it. So yeah, we'll see what happens. A lot to sift through, a lot to discuss with them later this week. Lewis Blake says, Anthony, are you going to the game? Isn't Michigan undefeated when you watch them in person? So yeah, I'm not trying to make a big deal out of this, but I have not seen, just by circumstance, I didn't see any of the games during the COVID season. There were some travel snafus the last few years, but I have not seen Michigan lose a game in person since the last time they played Alabama in that Citrus Bowl in Orlando. So again, I'm not making any grand proclamations, but let's just say there's a reason that I moved heaven and earth to make sure I wasn't missing the Rose Bowl this year.
Hopefully you got a good flight, and if you didn't, we will come and send somebody for you, a bus or something. Last time I went to the Rose Bowl, believe it or not, I took a bus, and that was after the 1989 season, and it was my second year at Michigan. And flights were ridiculous, and we decided to take a bus. It was the worst decision I ever made in my life, in terms of you want to talk about dregs of society. It was, and we fit right in. Don't get me wrong,
well,
but
we were right at home there. Yeah,
there was weed and there was hard stuff, and there were people with peg legs and everything else, and it was crazy. But now we'll be flying out there, whatever it takes to get you there, man. Planes, trains, or automobiles, because we missed you last year, man, in Arizona. We did. It's not the same when you're not there. We have a great time. These young guys, folks, used to make fun of me for saying, hey, we're going to have fun. And, but damn it, it's fun. When we get out there, we've been to crab houses this year. We've been,
watching Chris Balas play whack-a-mole with the crabs in Maryland was a sight to behold. So,
and we want to go to Houston, damn it. So you need to be there, and we'll make sure you get there.
Oh, hey, from your lips to the ears of the football gods. I will say I am kind of, not to give away my itinerary, but I am planes, trains, and automobiling it back home from LA. Got to fly into Chicago and then get a ride with Gus Polinski and the Kenosha Kickers into Detroit somehow. So
Polka 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 was a hit.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, let's move into ad read number 2 of the night. Our pals over at Lewis Jewelers. Simple question, guys. This is critical, and hopefully you haven't run out of time yet before Christmas here, but is your daughter's engagement ring bigger than your wife's? If the answer is yes, great news. Lewis Jewelers can help. It's stress-free and easy working with their non-commissioned expert of trusted advisors, finding that perfect diamond. So stop by today, fix this family issue. Don't let it be a thing. You don't want it to be a thing at the table on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, whenever you get together. So head on over to Lewis Jewelers, your diamond store, and so much more since 1921. Visit them at their new location. Well, it's been there for a bit now, but 300 South Maple Road in Ann Arbor, or online at lewisjewelers.com. Thank you to Lewis Jewelers for your sponsorship of not only the Wolverine podcast, but our operation in general. And yeah, go over, see them at South Maple Road, 300 South Maple Road in Ann Arbor. Thanks to the folks over there. All right, Chris. Yesterday was the Michigan Football Awards banquet. Handed out hardware to multiple guys in single categories, which we will not be doing, but we do have our own awards to hand off to kind of, we'll move out of award season now and transition into bowl prep and all that type of stuff. So have a couple of quick fire categories here to get to. The first one we will start with is, we'll just start with the MVP, the most valuable guy on this team, offense, defense, special teams, towel boy, water boy, sign stealer, whatever it is. Who is your MVP of the 2023 Wolverines?
It's JJ McCarthy, right? There's no question in my mind as a leader, what he did with this offense and just a winner. They followed him. Now there are plenty of guys that were important to the operation, but if you took one of them out, could they have survived? Yes, probably. They could have gotten by, not without JJ McCarthy. That made him the most valuable, no contest. Not just that, but he is one of the most pleasant and genuine people that we have ever covered. And for a superstar, especially, just unique in that sense. Tom Brady was the same back in the day, and now that was a little. I wasn't covering him full time at that point, but in the limited amount of time that we spent with him, just really, really a special guy. JJ McCarthy is in that same league, MVP all the way.
I saw a quote or a question or a comment, I should say. Words are hard this evening, from Odawa Traveler, who said Mikey Sainer still should have won it. That is my pick because that guy, again, Michigan didn't play a lot of close games early this year, but over the course of this season, whenever they've needed a big play, when they've needed a key turnover to flip momentum or flip whatever it is, Mikey Sainer still has delivered for them. And to the point where, again, you forget that he started his career at a different position. I mean, not only does he look like a natural, but he looks like the best nickel in college football. Again, I don't have the numbers in front of me to support that or not, but I believe 6 interceptions on the year, 4 or 5 interceptions, whatever it was. Just these key plays in critical moments. And to me, 2-time team captain, those guys have to be tone setters. Those guys have to be playmakers. And Mikey Sainer still has been that and then some this year. I just continue to, with what he's done for this program, he's a guy that I think you put in that conversation with Aiden Hutchinson and Blake Corum, and the list goes on and on of these pillars of the program over the last few years. So
yeah,
that would be my pick for MVP.
He'd be my choice for defensive MVP. No contest there either, in my opinion. He was right there, and what he did and what he's done in his career here is fantastic. Love those 3-star guys that develop and are better than people give them credit for coming in. He was outstanding. What a captain.
Yeah, the thing about, again, this is why National Signing Day, of course, coming up this week. This is why I don't trip about recruiting rankings or anything like that. This staff has gone out and not only find guys, in those lesser known areas of the country, or the lesser recruited guys, the low 4 stars, the high 3 stars, and they've turned them into linchpins of this program. So the fact that you have him as your defensive MVP, we'll just go to that one right now too.
Yep.
Defensive MVP, I will go with Michael Barrett. That's a guy that I think this year, again, talk about someone who's been a pillar, came back for a 6th year. I mean, a lot of guys that are in programs for 6 or 7 years wind up being doctors or lawyers or something. But Mikey Sainer still is a football player. He's a damn good football player. I'm sorry, Mike Barrett. Both of those guys are tremendous football players. And, I know there was a lot of talk coming to the year. Oh, well, they need to, Ernest Hausman, he's going to take that job. He's a quicker guy. He's a younger guy. Michael Barrett not only held him off this year, but I think he was their best overall linebacker. Not to say Junior Colson didn't play well. He did. He's another guy I think you could make an argument for here. But Michael Barrett, again, talk about the leadership, the playmaking ability, as fast and as quick to the football as we've ever seen him in his Michigan career. So that's my pick here for Defensive Player of the Year. Let's go to the offensive side of the ball. You said JJ McCarthy. What else? Do you have anything more to add to the singing of his praises?
Not really. I think Colston Loveland was pretty imperative. It's funny because everybody assumed the backs were going to be the guys carrying the offense this year, and of course they needed them. But it wasn't what it's been the last couple of years. And Colston Loveland really did break out. He was, I think, everybody's choice for breakout player of the year, except for mine. I think I had Tyler Morris because I really kind of felt that Colston Loveland broke out as a freshman, but to take it to the next level like he did. I saw somebody come over here with a question as well, saying, "Hey," or a comment that Colston Loveland is going to be a problem for the Alabama linebackers, and I think that's true. At the same time, there were times this year that he was bracketed and double teamed, and Jim Harbaugh said that I would fully expect Alabama to go that route with him as well and try to take him out of the game. So we'll see what Michigan comes up with, but to me, the fact that JJ McCarthy did it without elite wide receivers, they have good wide receivers, solid wide receivers. As Michigan receivers go in terms of a core, they're not up there with the best. But JJ McCarthy, what he was able to accomplish with those guys, and again, no disrespect meant to those guys, but was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, my pick would be JJ McCarthy as well in that category. Blake Corum right there. For all the reasons you said on McCarthy already, I mean, he's the total package. It's the leadership, it's the playmaking ability, it's the dual threat ability, it's the arm talent. I know a lot of people look at that production and go, "Oh, geez, well, he's no different than a Cade McNamara or a Shea Patterson was." And that's, to me, that's the first sign that you're not watching the games. I mean, this is a guy who, again, even in the games where he hasn't played super well, you still look down and, oh, he was 16 for 20 for 150 yards. The ball hardly touches the ground. He extends plays enough to make something happen. As far as Blake Corum goes, I guess you could kind of call this a shared award for me. The things that people say about maybe he's lost a step, that same juice isn't quite there. That is true, but that was also true last year. He was a guy that bulked up in order to be that lead back for Michigan, but in a gotta have it moment in those short yardage situations, in those goal line situations. I mean, he's got 24 touchdowns this year. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. They trust that guy implicitly. And I think a month off is probably good for him too, because I have no issues with them running him 30 times against Alabama, because I do think you can run on Alabama a little bit. So
we're going to find out. We're going to
we will
find out.
find out.
Hopefully they don't run it right at them and say, okay, we're going to, run it down your throat. They need to be creative. And they need to do some things out of formations that they haven't done all year. One of the things that I wrote today that one of the Big Ten coaches said, Anthony, was, when Max Bredesen's in the game, they said he's a good tight end. When he's in the game, they're going to run the ball. Well, those things are the things that need to change, right? You got to put stuff on film. And against Alabama, you can't just run right at them and expect, okay, granted, this is not the Alabama of old. We get it. Okay. But they still have great athletes. There's a reason that they beat Georgia. There's a reason that they have all this 5-star talent. And I mean, they're fast, they're big, they're physical. So, but I think Blake Corum can do some damage against this team. Keep pounding the rock, but do it in creative ways. Run some more play action. And what they've saved for Ohio State a couple of those years. You know what? Run it against Alabama. You're going to need it.
Yeah, no reason to hold anything back now. So let's move to newcomer of the year. This can be transfer. This can be freshman. The guy in your eyes who made the biggest impact as a new face this season.
Oh, that's a great one. Freshman or probably AJ Barner, right? I mean, some of the impact that he had in terms of at Michigan State, had a huge game. The way he blocked, they needed that number 2 tight end, right? After Eric all left, and AJ Barner was all that and more. I thought after the first game, he was absolutely dominant and was just fantastic. So very impressed with him and the impact that he made, not only what he provided in terms of physically and on the field, but in terms of a leadership role. He really assimilated well into the culture and became extremely valuable.
I'm going to go with Drake Nugent here. He's a guy, obviously, that was banged up in spring ball. It seemed like that first game or two didn't get off to the quickest start, but quickly, to me, solidified into the strength of the offensive line with Zach Sinter, obviously, and Trevor Keegan on each side of him. Pro Football Focus had him as, I think, the number 12 or 13 center in the country. He was rock solid across the board. And I know that there's been a lot of hype over the years for an up and comer in Greg Crippen, who might be this team's starting center next year. He competed with Drake Nugent in both camps this time around. But Nugent to me was about as rock solid as it gets, and again has a tough act to follow. Olu Oluwatimi was the best center in college football last year, best interior lineman in college football last year. And I thought that Drake Nugent did a really nice job. But honorable mention in this category, I would put Samaj Morgan just for again, not the biggest guy, not the strongest guy, but seems like another one of those guys where you need him to make a play. They dial something up for him, and then we see in the Big Ten championship game he's returning kicks and such too. So
Yep.
maybe that's a guy that you can explore a little more with in this Alabama game. The next category here, sorry, my list went away, was position coach of the year. Again, I think this would be a slam dunk if we were opening up to coordinators. I think it would obviously be Sharon Moore. You could obviously make a case for Jesse Minter too, but I want to know a guy who specifically coaches a position group that you were most impressed by this year.
You know what? I'm going to go with Jay Harbaugh and with the safeties. And I'll say this, we understand that, Rod Moore coming back, right? Stud. But what he did and got out of Makari Page, Keon Sabb started really coming on strong during the year. Quentin Johnson improved so much. I see somebody saying Clink. Clink could be up there as well because Josh Wallace had a great year too. But Quentin Johnson was playing his best football at the end of the year. And to me, what they got out of that group was they really got every drop of what they could get out of them. I thought Jay Harbaugh did a fantastic job. So I'm going to go with him. Clearly, it could have been a number of those guys. You know what? I would probably put Mike Elston up there with him as well because of what that defensive line accomplished playing together. So I'm going to say those two guys, but really selling a lot of other guys short here because it's such a good coaching staff.
Yeah, that's what I was going to go with Mike Elston. I mean, we think it wasn't too long ago where they were playing fullbacks at defensive tackle, or at least tried to for a little bit. And now they are as deep as that at that position as any on the roster. You look at the edge guys again, no dominant guys like a Hutchinson or Ojabo, but the way that they had been able to rotate. And I know a big emphasis for them this offseason was making sure that communication between the interior guys and the edge guys improved, and really just that front seven or whatever the group is in general. And that's going to be another area where I think Alabama will test them in this game in the Rose Bowl, given that mobile quarterback, you got to be disciplined. You got to communicate. You have to communicate. To me, that's one of the top maybe 3 reasons they lost that game to TCU last year. So to me, the way that Mike Elston has been able to not only cultivate that depth, but also develop guys. I mean, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, true sophomores are not supposed to be as good as those two guys are right now. And that arrow is still pointing up for them.
It's unreal.
So to me, that's been the secret sauce to all of this for them.
Good call.
So shout out to Mike Elston and Steve Clinkscale as well.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to got 2 more here. Best moment of the year, not necessarily a play, but a moment.
Rod Moore's pick. You know what? To me, just because that was the culmination of everything was relying on that one play, right? It was like, as Doug Carr said, Michigan's play-by-play guy. It was that game was like 3, right? Because everybody was saying you only won the other 2 games because you cheated against Ohio State, and they'd put so much on that. In fact, Ryan Day had backed himself into a corner saying, "Well, now we know. We just got to go out and win this game. Now we know why they won the other 2, essentially." And that one play. Really, you could just kind of sense the relief, and it all came out in that one play. And Jalen Harrell made a play on that one too, where knocking over the guard, but later says he tripped. He tripped because he got knocked on his ass because Jalen Harrell ran him over, hits the quarterback. Rod Moore, to me, that was the biggest moment. And Sharon Moore doing it was fantastic. I'd put the Penn State game right up there with it when Sharon celebrated. You could sense the relief on him after the game as well. A couple of cuss words that got him in trouble with his mama, but you know what? That was fun to watch as well.
Yeah, had to drop a few cents in the swear jar, I'm sure. But best moment for me, again, not that losing Zach Sinter was devastating, and I think is really that's a big thing to overcome here in this college football playoff. But from a moment perspective, everything from the "Let's go Zach" chant to Blake Corum putting up the 6-5 in the end zone after he scores the next play from scrimmage, to me, I mean, that was something that's right out of a movie. There's so much talk about, the last couple of years of Michigan, Ohio State, that's been cinematic. That was, to me, I mean, Rod Moore's moment was one of those moments. That was the swelling finale to the whole scene. But uh, that Michigan Ohio State game, I've gone back and watched it a few times now. Maybe not quite as much as we went back and watched the last few, but that moment, that whole sequence was incredible. So that's my moment of the year. Last one, Chris, best play of the year. So any individual play that sticks out from any of these games.
Man, Rod Moore again calling game. It's tough for me to, and I get it. It's the obvious one, but for me, Rod Moore, Ohio kid, saying before the play, somebody's going to got to call a game. It needs to be me or somebody else. But you could kind of sense that he was calling his number, and to make that play. And a lot of people had said, you know what, he didn't really live up to expectations this year, so on and so forth, and he'd been hurt. But that play right there, to call game and to deliver in the biggest game of the year, an Ohio kid in that game who was overlooked by Ohio State, to me, that's the one.
Yeah, to me, it's two plays, but it happened in the two rivalry games where the JJ McCarthy touchdown throws, where
Hmm.
he notices for a split second that a defender turns his back and he fires it in there. Two of his best throws of the season. One was against Michigan State. The other was obviously in that Ohio State game. Uh, Again, turn on the film. This isn't a guy that's just managing games. He's not just, taking the snap and handing it off to the running back. I mean, when the moment calls for it, he's made those big plays this year in those big time moments. So to me, probably more specifically the Michigan State one, just given one, the fact that it was an ass whooping, and two, that it was that first game after all of those allegations came out, and then he comes out and puts up a clinic. But then again, maybe any quarterback on the roster could have done that day. But JJ McCarthy was the one that did it and looked tremendous doing it. So any honorable mentions? Any other hardware that Chris Balas wants to hand out from this season?
Nah, I think that's good. How about James Turner as the unsung hero of the season with his field goals, huge field goals in the Ohio State game? If you told me before the season that he would be the special teams player of the year for Michigan over Tommy Doman, who also had an outstanding year, I'd have said, boy, then you're in pretty good shape. But the way that his kicks in those games were absolutely crucial. And kudos to him for stepping in and making those when they needed them. They don't win that game without him.
I can't argue with that at all. If I was giving out an unsung hero award, that's probably the one. So, well, let's move quickly, and emphasis on quickly because things still aren't super relaxed here yet. But Michigan basketball has their first win streak of the year since starting 3-0. Obviously, the win over Iowa last Sunday, win over Eastern Michigan this weekend. Juwan Howard was back this weekend. It seems like, I don't want to say the drama is in the rearview mirror for now because John Sanderson is still not with the program, question mark. We'll see if he travels to the Jumpman Invitational, but things are now, quote unquote, back to normal, so to speak. You look at this 5-game stretch that's coming up, and this is really just what I wanted to hit on is I think for Michigan's outlook the rest of this year, these next 5 games are everything. You're going to play this Tuesday night game in Charlotte, neutral floor against Florida, a team that's 7-3 right now. You're going to have 10 days and play at McNeese, which again, they've shown that bye games are not a guarantee for them the last few years, but you would think you'd be able to grab that one. And then you've got those games at home against Minnesota. Then you go to the Palestra to play Penn State in January, followed by a game on the road against Maryland. So you look at this 5-game stretch here, and if we're going to have any type of conversation about them figuring this year out, it's 4-1 or 5-0, right?
Yeah, 100%. Almost 5-0. If you really want to make the tournament and get really back, where you need to be. And it really starts with Florida. It's a good basketball team, a solid basketball team. They really crashed the glass. So I enjoyed your column on that today. I agreed with it. And I think this is the one that is really going to propel you, kind of like Michigan State with Baylor, right? That was the one where that kind of brought them back from the dead. And I kind of feel like this is kind of the similar situation with Michigan here. So they did a great job bouncing back against Iowa when you had all of that. I don't expect John Sanderson back based on, the things that we've heard and what's been going on with that program anytime soon. I hope I'm wrong, but for them to overcome that and do what they did to Iowa, to me, was pretty damn impressive. So if they can do it tomorrow, I think it's going to be a tight one. You know what, coming down the stretch, I think it's going to be one of those games that they're going to have to pull out, and hopefully they've learned how to pull out these games in the last couple of minutes better than they have in the recent past.
I think the biggest thing too is that you start to, when there's at least some sort of extended run of success. Again, a 2-game win streak is nothing, but you look at some of the things, the shared traits of those 2 wins. It was that you had multiple guys scoring. You had, a lot of, double digit scorers. I think 6 of them in each of the last 2 games. I mean, to me, it's important to know that, and Olivier Comwa said this after the game, that, good teams need to have those guys that pick up the other guys when the shots aren't falling. And last year, if Jet Howard didn't play well, if Hunter Dickinson didn't play well, that was curtains for them. If Kobe Buffkin didn't play well, that was curtains for them. But, you have a guy in Doug McDaniel who I think has played pretty well, all things considered, as a second-year point guard. Terrace Reed is starting to figure it out a little bit lately. Kamwa has been the guy that they would hoped he would be. They could somehow, by hook or by crook, you watch their offensive sets. Sometimes they struggle to shoot, and you're like, I have no idea how this team scored 80 points tonight, but they've been able to do it, and their offensive profile is actually pretty good. But
the 3-ball, the 3-ball's been falling, right, Anthony?
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the key.
Yeah.
So it's been that, and also defensively, still super inconsistent there. I mean, just if they can just find a way to be slightly below average on defense, you're not even asking the world out of them. Get a couple stops in a big moment. You might be able to, again, we know this Big Ten is not as strong as it has been, but every night out is pretty much a chance at a resume win to some extent. Tomorrow night is the last chance for a resume win in non-conference play. And I think the key to, if you can get out of this non-conference slate or this pre-New Year's slate at 8-5, the analytics say if you could just go 10-10 in Big Ten play, you're probably making the NCAA tournament. So this is where tomorrow's night game is. You don't want to call them must wins on December 19th, but given that they've already let a bunch of them slip through their fingers, it does feel that way.
Yep, that was a great column you wrote, and I agreed with it 100%. So, well, maybe they'll be better defensively with Juwan Howard back now too. You know what? A little more cohesion, and I don't think there's going to be as much confusion on the bench as to who they're supposed to be listening to, and hopefully that goes for the officials as well when they're handing out their technical fouls. So, all right, we got quick questions here, man. I got 11% battery left and a quiche in the oven here, so we should probably do that.
All right. Well, we will tend to that here. We will take the first question here from Antoine Johnson. Says, any word on Damani Jackson? What's the likelihood of us picking him up? Have you heard anything? Well, he's not officially in the portal yet, but
Chris. Michigan, we've heard Alabama's name in there as well. Michigan was really strong with him, as you know. Going back, we do believe that Michigan will have a shot here. The question to me is, how good is he, right? So, now, and also the other question is, with admissions, right? Because he's a sophomore, is he going to be able to transfer over? That's another. It's usually freshmen or it's seniors, and really not a whole lot in between, unless guys are accelerated. And he's not going to have graduated by the time he leaves USC. So that to me is going to be one of the detriments to landing him. So, but there will be other guys, and we've mentioned some of them. The kid from Western Kentucky, some other corners in the portal that they're looking at. So there will be other options as well.
I want to take this one from the board from Go Blue Guy, who says, how big of a difference will Alabama signing George Hilo have on things? Just a change in the signs or something more significant?
What do you think?
Michigan, unlike some of the people that bitch about them nonstop, changes their signs. So I don't see that being a huge issue. I mean, I think operationally, Jesse likes to do X in X situation, but you pick up that stuff from being on film anyway. So I don't know that it's a huge deal.
I agree.
Again, he hasn't worked. If it was Chris Partridge that went and signed at Alabama, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, maybe something that doesn't feel right. But guy hasn't worked at Michigan in a year. There was a parting of ways back in the winter, and Michigan and Alabama are much different teams than they were back then. So
yeah, I mean, they certainly are.
I don't. It's a social media headline. It's juicy, but I think it stops there.
I don't think it's a big deal either. I would agree with you 100%.
Let's go to another one from the board. Chris, you can stop me if you've heard this one before. Someone wants to know what's the latest on the Jim Harbaugh contract.
If it doesn't get done this week, guys, then I think he's going to be flirting heavily with the NFL. I almost expect that at this point, based on what we've heard recently. We'll have an update on that at the Wolverine tomorrow. Ward Manuel was down in Miami watching the Dolphins play the Jets, so I don't think they were working on it a whole lot this week. He missed the banquet as well, and it's not like we were expecting him to sit there and hammer it out and and say be on the phone constantly on a Sunday. But I really expected him at the banquet, showing his support for that team. So that was kind of a disappointment in my opinion. But you know what? I think Jim Harbaugh's got an itch. I really do. And it's nothing that that any jock itch spray or anything like that is going to get rid of. He wants to win the Lombardi Trophy. And to me, he's accomplished a ton here. And if they don't sign him before they leave for Pasadena, according to the people that we've spoken with, then you would probably imagine something's going to go into January and February again.
Yeah, my thing with this is that once you've forfeited, you forfeited the right to be upset with his timeline when you didn't get this done when you were working on it halfway through this year, when you didn't get it done back in the winter when it should have been agreed to in the first place. And the timing of it, I mean, again, it sucks that the NCAA stuff popped up, but now that we're here, I mean, Black Monday in the NFL is now, I believe, 3 weeks from today. It's, if I'm Jim Harbaugh's representation, I'm not signing anything until I explore all avenues.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens. I think that the job that to me would probably be the most appealing to him is now open with the Los Angeles Chargers. But, anyone who's anyone is going to be interested in that job. And there are a lot of people questioning whether or not the Chargers are willing to pay up. So we'll see what happens there. I think at this point, it's weird to say that Jim Harbaugh has quote unquote earned the right to see this through.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, I mean, ride this season out and see what happens. And if nothing materializes, you sign it on January 15th or whatever the hell. And if something does materialize, Jerome Moore, come on down.
So that's where I am. And he shares an agent with Tom Brady, by the way, and Don Yee, who is now Tom Brady is also part owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. So that's one I'll be watching as well. So, all right, one more question here before my computer dies.
All right, let's go to. It's going to take one from the board, but it's a lot of people arguing with each other today. So
I got you.
Maybe we just call it there. Chris, thank you so much for your time. We will be back Thursday to not only take another look at the Rose Bowl, but also last show before the holiday, a little bit of a holiday layoff for us, and then we get on a plane next week. So thank you to our sponsors. Be sure to like and subscribe. Use that promo code UM1 to get 2 months of access for our YouTube viewers only. 2 months of access to the website for $1. Be sure to take advantage of that. A lot of intel coming from our end of things. Guys, thank you so much for your time. We will talk to you again next time around.